You big boys can't eat a little meatball?
Because of one simple fact.
Boys are better than girls!
Boys versus girls is one of the dumbest tropes that should never be used again. Not only because the discussion of genders have been expanded upon today, but it pushes the narrative of putting the wedge between them. There is one in particular that is the most egregious. But we'll get to that. There are a few episodes that do handle this topic well, and I want to start off with something that is really the best out there. So this is one of the two episodes that actually ends in a way that I believe is a great way to solve a conflict between boys and girls. While there are extremities on both sides that do play out in future, it portrays the importance of them working together rather than trying to bring them apart. This episode focuses on number 4 going to a female boarding school, where the main villain of this episode, Miss Margaret, wanted to change all the boys into girls to make an all-female society in the world. So, number 4 has been one of the main characters in the KND that gets involved in a lot of gender-focused episodes. However, this one is certainly the most extreme, as this is the only episode where he is the main target of Miss Margaret in order to reach her goals. A common issue with a lot of episodes like this is that there has to be some sort of winner. This is not the case in this episode. The reason why I consider Future one of the best examples of boys versus girls is how it took both genders to work together to defeat a greater evil, which is the case with the granddaughter of number 3, Sally Sanban, as she was able to send the older version of number 4 back in time to save the version we know within the series. There are a variety of variables that show how boys and girls can be united despite the differing traits society likes to push in order to keep us separate. And in the end, we are shown a much more peaceful version of the future where all kids have fun together. This is the cream of the crop where we do get the tension between boys and girls at a high level, but it emphasizes the importance of being together. And this wasn't the only episode that shows that. So we find out that Arthur and Muffy share the same birthday together as they were preparing a party on the same day, with neither side having the ability to reschedule due to performing acts being booked or family that's visiting from Ohio?
Ooh, Ohio!
No, we're not giving love to Ohio.
Where's Ohio?
See, Binky gets it. So Muffy and, for some reason, Buster were the ones that split the friend group based on their gender. So, nitpick time. I do find it a bit strange that Buster has the anti-girl stance out of all of the boys, mainly because he's very lighthearted and gullible in nature. Granted, it's been a long time since I've watched Arthur, so I could be wrong. However, the situation became worse as the day got closer, as the amount of glares and scowls between the kids became more concerning. Arthur and Francine don't want to exclude either side because of this inconvenience, so the two decided on a plan to get everyone together and celebrate both Arthur and Muffy.
Surprise! Happy birthday!
This episode had a great ending and once again shows how the two sides can work together, and that unity triumphs all. But unfortunately, not every episode has that end result. But can an episode be good if we do have a victor between genders? This episode comes with an interesting premise where we see Vince and Gretchen go head to head in an election to be class president. Finch has always been able to win that title every single year. However, this time Gretchen was thrown into the crossroads by Spinelli nominating her. When the boys joined that nomination believing that beating someone would make it more memorable for Finch, that's what caused Gretchen to take on this challenge, to prove that she shouldn't be seen as an afterthought. It's intriguing that this shows to be more than just a mere boys versus girls concept, as this is also a David versus Goliath with differing levels of popularity. It also divides into how politicians try to sway you with getting their votes, and what tactics are used. But what really sticks out to me was how Gretchen ends up winning against all odds, because with the 4th grade class being a 50-50 split, one vote she was able to grab was from Vince himself.
Because you were right.
You wanted to win so you could do something really cool. Me? I just wanted to win so I could win.
Vince being humble and understanding that Gretchen actually wants to help improve the school with a more democratic leadership rather than just taking the title. It shows how people of differing genders can support one another and understand when to let things go. Though this will be the last one that ends in a way where both sides are satisfied. The first chapter of the Powerpuff Girls vs. the Rowdy Rough Boys has to be mentioned in particular because it is an episode that was a product of its time. Now, I'm not saying that it was a bad episode, because it shows that the two teams are evenly matched, with the boys having the slight edge because of their lack of empathy towards others if they get hurt during the battles. This is the second episode that does rely heavily on the differing stereotypes between boys and girls. With the help of Miss Bellum, the girls were able to think outside of the box in order to defeat the boys, which is giving them smooches. Now, obviously, with these being 6-year-old kids in a show that ran in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were going to push those traits heavily. At the same time, it was filled with a lot of action that makes up for it. So I can't say there is much to complain in this instance. Again, it's the product of its time, and it certainly can be remembered fondly. How about we get into another show that was popular around its original run? Now we are starting to see a lot of similarities in boys versus girls episodes in animation. Having an extreme cocky boy that thinks that girls can never beat him, while the girl has to be the one to shut him up by being as good, if not better, than the boy she's challenging. While yes, it can be used to show some humbleness to the male character, I don't think Phineas and Ferb did it as well as it could have been. Now, I will say that the two playing those respective roles make the most sense here, with it being Buford and Isabella. Phineas and Ferb is very simplistic in nature, so they don't really dive into the discussion outside of girls are just as good. So while yes, it can be important for a boy to be humble in that aspect, Buford didn't learn that, to be honest, since he showed respect after the Agent P shenanigans were wrapped up. It's not an episode that was really egregious in this trope, but it doesn't leave me with a feel-good scenario by the end of it. So it makes sense in my eyes that it's the middle of the pack, and the next episode is going to be on the same playing field. Camp Lazlo was one of those shows that does have you turn your brain off while watching, and this episode, It's No Picnic, is no different here. The Beans and Squirrel Scouts have a dispute over who has rights to play in the mud puddle. While I do think this is a plus for having the girls wanting to get dirty while having fun, unlike other shows based in the 2000s, there was a lot of aggression from the squirrels in all levels of this troupe. The girls basically destroyed the boys mentally and physically with no repercussions whatsoever. While no one did end up getting the mud puddle in the end, they just continued to squabble over something else, which amounts to repeating the situation over again. This pattern becomes more prominent when it comes to this trope, and it doesn't get any better from here. So, it's no surprise that while many praise Total Drama Island as one of, if not the best season of the franchise, it was a product of its time. There are a lot of misogynistic moments within the first season, and does show the worst in the girls. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense since this is supposed to be a reality show parody, and a lot of the women that get featured on these types of shows are incredibly messy. So Total Drama was not afraid to go that route in Brunch of Disgustingness. We're mainly going to be focusing on the pre-challenge discourse here, as they went really hard on making the girls be aggressive towards each other, which made this a rough situation for Bridget to dive into. With Heather and Lindsay looking to heavily recruit her, she gets caught in the fire. Compared to the boys, it's a lot more of a chill environment, and they come into the challenge as a more cohesive unit. This sums up how each gender is portrayed throughout this episode, as the guys are the ones that are cool, calm, and collected, while the girls are seen as feisty, rude, and incompetent. Bridget was the only one trying to combat her team's frustrating attitude, until the final round where she finally broke.
But dolphins are our friends!
This put the teams at a stalemate, but eventually it was the fellas that ended up taking the win after Owen took it home, which opened the worst kind of floodgates. While it's not the most pleasant ending, there is another episode that shows the guys at their most negative attributes. Although shows back in the day weren't really one for going into the lessons department, and you can look no further than Futurama's Utopia. So this episode starts as with any adult episode around the mid-2000s, which is sexualizing the women in order to make a quick buck to save the company, which didn't equate to much since there were only 2 women on staff in Leela and Amy. While Hermie brings in La Barbara to help with that as well. Obviously, this once again shows the cockiness and disrespectful nature the men have towards the women by subjecting them to dehumanizing events, as well as not really hearing what they have to say. It becomes very frustrating to witness what happens as it highlights the negative situation to a cartoonish degree. Yes, it's ironic, I know. When they realize they were only able to fill a quarter of the calendar, they have to think of another plan.
We'll turn it into a commercial airline.
But that was my idea.
Then you should have talked louder.
Yeah, of course. They continue to not see the women as equal by continuing to have them wear revealing clothes and give important jobs to men who are less qualified than the women in this instance. It resulted in the ship crash landing in a mysterious planet, which caused a lot of tension between everyone on the flight, and that's when the gender war began. Pandering the interest of a curious being, neither side got anything done, so the being decided to mess around with their genders. Yep, this is a gender swap episode, where this being is screwing with everyone's chromosomes. It ends with each side swapping each other's gender. It really rushes the plot of the 2 sides understanding one another, and tries to give the women the justice they deserve by continuing the sexualization of women in order to save the company, but with the gender-bent versions of the guys. Yeah, this episode was really messy with trying to portray the message of understanding the perspective of the opposite gender, and using the reliable Deus Ex Machina didn't really give me a lot of appreciation for this episode. So you can sum that up to it being another product of its time, much like our next episode. Teen Titans Go really shows off a lot of the boys' incompetence throughout this franchise's lifespan. Crazy how long this show has been going on. Anyways, it should come to no surprise that Cartoon Network's most popular cartoon will have this sort of episode in its arsenal. And it does play the most obnoxious guy tropes within this episode, with the guys being very loud, disgusting, and overall cocky. Of course, that got shut down real quick when Starfire and Raven challenged the guys to a competition and completely destroyed them, which resulted in Beast Boy and Cyborg deciding to be girls since they seem better. Yeah. It ends up being a petty contest between genders to the point where cooties came into play when Robin gets salty. Even though he was able to contaminate the girls successfully, it ended up backfiring. In the end, the girls prove that they are superior, but the guys feel they are the best at humbling themselves. Yeah, I'm not really a big fan of this episode. I get where they are coming from when it comes to recognizing that girls can be just as good, if not better, at certain activities than guys. However, it does feel disingenuous in execution, making it seem like you have to see girls as superior in every way, which isn't the idea you want to see. Yes, Teen Titans Go is a show that will always be very hyperactive while having these sorts of discussions, and this episode is very early on in its run. However, I definitely appreciate it more than the next episode we're going to look at. Alright, so this episode is one of the more unorthodox in concept. However, just because it's different, that doesn't equate to good results. This discourse was caused because of the curiosity of the boys witnessing a toy the girls made and mistaking it for a device that could tell the future of another person. So what better way to get this device than to have one of the boys fake their own death and have them dress up as a girl to go to a slumber party. Obviously, this gave us some subplot shenanigans of Butter's parents not taking the news very well of their son allegedly yeeting himself off a building. In any case, this episode really shows how the boys don't really understand what girls are like with the amount of ignorance shown within it. And the one who suffers the most from this experience is Butters. With being chosen to do this mission, he was forced to wear the most obnoxiously stereotypical getup in order to try to sneak into the upcoming slumber party. The guys did not understand that the girls were not very pleased with meeting the new girl, Margarine, and they were quick to ostracize her. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to the girls' treatment of Butters as Margarine. It didn't help that Butters freaked out and called them witches while they were playing a game, but it did ramp up the girls' annoyance, and they decided to rip Margarine apart.
How about we all give you a little makeover, Margarine? Yeah! Come on, let's go! You mean it?
Once the girls tried to accept Margarine for who she is, Butters was having a wonderful time at the party. It was probably the sweetest moment of the episode, until it got ruined for the boys' aggressive and rude behavior towards Butters for being sidetracked. It really does paint the guys in a negative light here, especially when Butters finally has the toy and dips once he's found out. It was a messy episode that definitely doesn't do a lot of favors in being a good episode in this trope. However, there is one episode that beats it, as why Boys vs. Girls is stupid and outdated. Yeah, we're talking about the original Fairly Odd Parents. And I think this episode shows the stereotypes of both genders in the worst way. Obviously, there are some issues that occurred throughout the show's run, like Tootie's stalker's obsession with Timmy, and Timmy's stalker's obsession with Trixie being the obvious ones. However, the most egregious is how they show the negative gender tropes blatantly. The issues we'll have is when Timmy wished for the boys and girls to separate, all because many of the girls made him look like a sad mess after a rejection. Obviously, this is how Fairly Odd Parents roll as a whole. Timmy deals with the universe's most insane bullcrap. However, it does place Timmy's selfishness in the forefront. So that wish built a wall. God damn it. And shows off the stereotypes quite a lot, with the guys being hairy apes that roughhouse, and the girls having a princess-like republic that enjoys shopping and having agency. The issue with this is that the episode wants to show how alien the two genders are compared to each other, to the point that it makes it hard for us to see how they can be compatible without Cupid. It pushes the binary concept way too hard and doesn't dive into how both sides can be interested in something that doesn't confirm their assigned gender, like how the boy would-be queen did, for example. In concept, having to appreciate those that love you for who you are and be content with those that don't see you that way is good. In execution for this situation was horrendous. Using this void that can't fill for either gender is pushing the narrative of needing a significant other, not for who they are, but what the opposite gender is expected to do. We never dive into why Trixie loves Timmy or why Cosmo loves Wanda. This episode does not want to dive into the individual traits as to why one person loves another. And it made me feel like I'm watching a baby version of what role you should play in society. Men do all the labor and women do the cleaning. And I think we've moved past that.